Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich, and today, physically here in the house in St. Michael, we have Pete Tavernier. How you doing, Pete?
Doing well, man.
Dude, did I get the Tavernier correctly? All right,
spot on.
Locked it in. Former bartender, tavern.
Barkeeper.
Yeah, barkeeper. There we go.
Yeah.
And must run in the family. Probably from the 1500s.
Yeah, right.
Who knows? But what a pleasure to have you here today, man. I know we've been talking for some time. We briefly met at Wild at Heart, had a chance to share our stories and testimony. But what was incredible and stuck out to me is just the story of packing your bags and moving to Haiti and following the Lord's calling, having amazing, crazy experiences of doors closing and others opening and wondering why, God. And so through all of that, we get a chance to dive in and learn about how he's shown you what he has for you next, despite what our plans might be. So I look forward to hearing about that. Also, the fact that you've been successful in building a pretty amazing business that has allowed you to have freedom of some time and money to really prioritize the most important things in your life, and family, God, obviously the organization you steward, but we'll get a chance to dive into that and how you have a couple different auto shops and today doing well, serving others and fixing their cars. So thanks for being here, Pete. Why don't you say hello? Tell us the quick high level about your family and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, dude.
So I've got married, going on 14 or just over 14 years now. And we've got 4 girls. I've got 13-year-old twins, a 11-year-old, and then an almost 8-year-old. And I've got 2 auto repair shops, one in New Hope and one in Andover. And we've also got a ministry side of things that we do, and that's ever growing. A lot of that stemmed out of our time in Haiti. And so, excited to unpack it all.
That's awesome. And the cool part is, when we first met is actually second time as we met up at a coffee shop, you used the word economic engine, right?
Yep.
As business as a way of fueling ministry, business as missions. And so using that language, I was like, oh, this guy's speaking my language, because at the end of the day, for much is given, much is expected. And it's great to see someone who's stewarding business in that way, stewarding marriage in that way, stewarding fatherhood in that way. So really excited to unpack that and just hear more about that journey and the trials, but also how God continues to show you next parts of the plan that we're all still trying to figure out. So Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So did you do anything with your shop at all in video and YouTube? No. But a lot of it has just been so useful for you and the learning. Okay. Yeah. But prior to that was old school. Okay. Yeah. So, and remind me too, so 3 years younger, that would have been like 05 graduated?
Yep.
And then where'd you meet your wife?
At my cousin's wedding out in New Jersey.
So other side of the family?
So my mom's side of the family, yeah. So my dad was born and raised in Minneapolis, and my mom grew up out in Jersey. And then they met at North Park University down in Chicago.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Wow. And so whose wedding was it?
My cousin.
Your cousin.
Yeah,
okay.
So my mom grew up out there, and both my uncles and my grandma and grandpa lived there. My aunt lived in California, but growing up, my uncles and my grandparents were in Jersey.
Got it.
And so our families, my family and my wife's family, are super intertwined that way. My father-in-law worked, both my uncles had their own separate sheet metal companies, doing like HVAC sheet metal. And my father-in-law worked for both of them individually. My mother-in-law babysat my cousins, and my mother-in-law used to hang out with my
interaction
uncle,
with all of the families. But so it was bound to happen.
There's rumors of a photo floating around with us when we were like 4 or 5 years old.
No way.
Yeah, because our family, my wife's grandfather founded the church. He was the lead pastor anyways, growing up, when she was growing up, and my uncle was a deacon in that church, and they also had a school. And my cousins went to school there, and my cousins also taught there when my wife was there. I mean, just like super intertwined.
Wow. So, okay. So, but that whole experience, was that in the Midwest or in Chicago then, or Illinois?
No, New Jersey.
Okay. So, wow. So where did the the photo would have happened at that
out
point.
in Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, because my aunt and uncle used to have these big like carnivals every summer for the church, and so we would go out, and sometimes
You would
we were
travel there.
Yeah.
Because you weren't living there.
No.
You were
like
born here, right?
Yeah. It'd be like our summer
got it.
family vacation was a road trip.
Jeez, to Jersey?
To Jersey, yeah.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah, we still do it quite a bit now because my mother-in-law, my wife's family is all still there, and so 20 hours straight through.
And I suppose with the crew you carry, because four kids, all girls?
Yep.
All girls. And remind me the ages.
13, 11,
Twins.
and 8. Almost
Dude,
8.
We must have talked about this because it's 13, 12, and 9 for me, but boy, girl, boy. 4. So 2 teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. I got 1 boy teenagers practically like comes with the girl stuff, pretty boy type. So, but girls, holy buckets. So they would be then going into 8th grade or freshman?
Yes. No, they're 8th grade.
Okay, so
same. Yeah, they'll be going into 8th grade, and then Sky's going into 6th, and then Bentley is going into 4th. I'm terrible with that stuff. I just
terrible with the kids' grades. I mean,
I don't remember
ages, birth dates, grades, teachers' names. Like, come on.
I'm good. I'm mostly good with age. Birthdays, definitely. I got those down pat.
That's good. Well, I have birth dates here just in case as I get older.
Written on so you don't forget them.
5 kids, man. But it's crazy how many people don't know.
Yeah.
Like siblings and parents' birth dates, and I'm like, I've kind of always remembered, but
I feel like it's mostly the dads.
Yeah,
a lot of times. My wife could tell you like what time they were born, blood types, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. They got like blonde hair, blue eyes.
Time of day, how where she was at the time. I'm like, duty called, I showed up.
Right.
Yeah. Man. Okay, so at the high level, the podcast for me came from this place of Successfully Unsuccessful. The premise of, first of all, success in the eyes of the world looks very much different than hearing "well done, good and faithful servant," right? At the end when we face Jesus. And so the idea of perpetuating unsuccess, successfully unsuccessful, is every day we fall short, but we still are all driven towards this success, this word that really has no black and white objective definition. It's very subjective for everyone. And so I like it because the premise sets it up for vulnerability to talk about our unsuccesses, the things that we struggle in. But guys that have navigated being a professional and a business owner and a husband and a father in the midst of life, right? In the trenches, dealing with trying to make a name, trying to build wealth, trying to it starts with paying bills. We have more time in the beginning than we have money, so we got to go work.
Yep.
Right? But some people get stuck with work to live or live to work. And so for me, it was never about, I want to just go work. I want to do things differently so I can buy freedom. I want to just do things my own way, right? Absolutely. That was my drive.
Yep.
And so every so often, I got guys, certainly business owners, and I also have guys that are just in the thick of running, large departments in a corporate world. But I think the commonality is husbands, fathers, men, believers that are representing the struggles we all face, right? And so I like to kind of do a couple things. One is talk about the business journey, and sort of for you, obviously it goes back to as far back as you can remember working on vehicles. And,
right.
And so remind me, did you own a shop before you went to Haiti?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you sell it?
No.
So that was the same shop. It was running?
No. I closed the doors.
Closed it.
I sold off all the
same location though?
Nope.
No. So then what happened to that asset in the building?
I just sold off. Well, so I was leasing.
So you just closed the doors. The building got released to someone else.
Multi-tenant building. There was like, I don't know, 10 bays in it,
Wow.
And 10 business condo unit type
gotcha,
things.
Gotcha. Couple thousand square feet each or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
they were like 2,500 square feet.
Yeah,
I had a double. I started in a 25, then I moved to the other side of the building, got a double 5,000 square foot. So when I made the decision to move, I just sold off all my big equipment, but I was starting a trade school down there, so I needed all my hand tools, all my specialty equipment, all that kind of stuff. So I held on to all that, and then.
And that was pre-COVID or after?
Yeah, no, that was pre-COVID. We moved home pre-COVID. So we were down there 2017, 2018.
Okay, and then 3 years or
Two.
Two. Okay.
17 and 18.
So then coming back literally
End
would
of
have
18.
been.
December of 18 is when.
Oh, 17, 18 is when you were there. Coming
Yep.
back 18.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, and so I forget what bridged you to. Let's go to Haiti, because 6 years ago you had.
Yep.
Geez, your youngest would have been.
10 months old when we moved.
Whoo. Yes. All right. So was that a faith journey from the beginning?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were feeling called there. Your wife said, "I support you." I'm not really. This is in the beginning though. Was she interested? Because I know she didn't have a
No.
super exciting time there, but
No.
never even then.
I mean, she felt called to support me
you.
as as my wife. So that all started back in 2014. Was when I took my first trip down there.
So you've been like on a missions trip and
Yep. Yeah,
saw
so
some things.
My uncle was building a mission house down there, like a micro hotel kind of thing. Held like 30 people, had, I don't know, 8 or 10 rooms.
For the purposes of the NGOs that were kind of coming and going.
Bringing down mission groups, right? So like youth group wants to go down and do a missions trip. The problem is that you either rent 10 or 15 hotel rooms and you have no common area, you have nowhere to,
And
talk
these could be
about
from
how-
miles from each other, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the size of the hotels, where we were at up in Cap Haitian, which is up on the northern coast, there was a couple of larger hotels, and so he would bring groups down there, and he hated the fact that they would, end of the night would come, they'd eat dinner, and then they'd all go back to their rooms, and nobody would hang out, nobody would talk, and so he built this house, and it was kind of a U shape, with a huge great room in the center where everybody would eat breakfast together. Everybody can congregate.
Was there worship too that eventually
people
came?
would bring their guitars down. Somebody donated a guitar, so there was a couple of guitars down there.
Who built it again?
My uncle.
Your uncle.
Yeah.
Is he still down there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow,
he's down
what brought
there
him
probably-
down there for mission?
It was he was a big commercial HVAC. He had a commercial HVAC
So this is
company.
that same guy. Yeah.
Yep. And my mom's brother. And so he went down on like a pastor's convention or something like that. He like tagged along and went down just to kind of like check it out. And it was a pretty crazy time in his life too, because he had been a part of that church, which is a Reformed Baptist, the one my grandfather or my wife's grandfather was the lead pastor of. And long story short, they told him that the only people that can be missionaries are like pastors, and he was like, well, no. I'm going
to do what I got to do.
Yeah, exactly. He felt called to, basically retire down there, and instead of building his retirement home, he built a mission house down there. And he went against a lot of people's advice, but that's what, I mean, oftentimes people, when God puts a calling on your life, nobody understands that but you, because that calling is on your life and it was given to you. And it's not like there's banners and, flying behind an airplane saying, hey, I called him to do this.
And it may be for him, right? That stuff, the affirmations that come is like, yep, God continues to reveal to me I'm supposed to be here, right?
Yep.
But in the midst of that, everyone else is going,
what is this guy doing? Right.
So that was kind of his, and that would have been early on. Then when?
Yeah, so that was like 05, 06.
So almost 8-9 years before you were down there. So
Yeah.
there was already established.
Yep.
When you first came.
So he went down, did a handful of trips, and then like went through like the separation with the church, and like went through all kinds of crazy different stuff, and then made the decision to build a mission house, and then buying property in Haiti is a whole insane thing, and then he started building it, and he had a friend of his who was an electrician who was like super generous, donated all of his time and energy and paid for, a lot of the materials and everything like that. My uncle designed it, drew it, and was kind of the GC, which is complicated because you're building in a country that, he didn't speak the language. Right. build things totally different than they do here in the States, you know.
So he's probably has some experts that don't look like experts compared to what he might know, right? And now, not only that, he's probably not a full GC, right? He's makeshift.
Right. Yes, exactly. And so he and I didn't, I mean, the first 25, 30 years of my life had almost no relationship. The only relationship that we really had was around cars. And he had an old Triumph that that I loved. And, but that was about the depth of our relationship.
Really?
Yeah. 'Cause I mean, if you can't tell, I'm a bit of a, troublemaker and, go against the grain.
Yeah.
Which is funny because he was too when he was a kid, but he turned his life around and he was devout is not the right word, but that's what's coming to mind. But anyways, he was pretty strict, rule follower and stuff like that later in life. And so he and I just butted heads on so many things.
Growing up?
Yeah, growing up.
Because he had kind of conformed at some point, and you were kind of going through the journey.
And I was going through the rebellion state.
Got
it.
And
so anyways, he called me one time, and he was asking me, he was in Jersey, and he was dropping his car off to get it fixed, and he knew that I was, I had my shop at the time, and he was just kind of curious what these symptoms might be and what I thought it was going to cost to repair it, etc. And I thought he was building like an orphanage down there. I had no idea what he was doing.
So you hadn't really, you hadn't seen him or heard, probably hadn't had a lot of contact. Yeah.
No. And so I just asked him what he was doing, and he was telling me, I'm building this mission house, blah, blah, and then he kind of offhandedly, he was like, I'm really struggling to find somebody to plumb the house. I've got an electrician. I'm, doing the...
Just shared this with you openly?
Yeah, and he was like, so if you happen to know a plumber, that wants to come to Haiti and plumb this house, let me know. And I was like, well, I was a plumber.
Were you?
Yeah, I was a plumber for 2 years, and out of high school. And I was like, I talked to Joel, like, maybe I can come down there and help plumb the house. I don't know. And so like 2 weeks later, I hopped on an airplane, flew to Haiti for the first time, and that was April of 14. And then I came home for like 2 weeks, and then I went back for 2-3 weeks, and then I came home for a week, and then I was back down for 2-3 weeks. I don't know, I struggle to remember how many bathrooms, but it was a 10 bedroom, and every bedroom had their own bathroom. Plus there was like the common area bathroom, plus there was the kitchen. We had to like make our own septic. So I was trying to like design a septic for like 30 people in this house. Yeah. It was nuts, man. And
finding some big tube. What'd you end up using for it all to collect?
Well, they have like these
basins,
plastic septic tanks, but then I had to figure out how to draw up and design like the drain field for it, and it was I've never done anything like that.
Right.
It's like,
good thing the internet did sort of exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
YouTube.
Absolutely. Get YouTube certified in septic systems.
There you go.
And,
I think a lot of folks have done that.
Yeah. Well, and then learning how to, it's all gravity fed. It's not pressure. And so then you've got a well, and you've got to pump the well water up into the cisterns up on the roof. And then it was like, it'd be really nice if we had hot water down here so we could take a shower. And so then gravity fed solar hot water systems. Yeah, it was super intriguing. But the first time I went down there, I stepped off the airplane and I looked around, and I just I felt like God was like, you're here for way more than plumbing.
Okay. And in the middle of that, so that's 14-ish?
14.
And so had you had a shop going?
I had a shop going, yep.
But
and I had a couple of employees.
So you were in a spot where you could probably make it work. It was probably a little premature?
It was very premature.
Okay. So were you dealing with drama from down there at all? From the shop? From a work standpoint?
But my first shop was Pete's, and everybody knew Pete, and I knew everybody, and I knew their kids' names, and I was like, you
were the name, you were the brand, right? Yeah.
And so people found out I was in Haiti, so they're like, oh, we'll just wait till he gets back.
Oh, unreal.
Wow. So business, they did everything they could to keep it going, but I think at that point I had one gal at the front desk, and I had 1 or 2 technicians and myself. So it's a very small operation.
Wow. But enough to not have to stress, but still be aware that it was providing for you, right? But you were being paid while you were down there. So
I wasn't being paid by my uncle.
No?
I think I think he bought my plane ticket down, but he didn't like pay me to do any of the work or anything like that.
Oh, so you came to, so when he asked you about, a plumber,
Yeah.
he was hoping to find a free plumber?
Yeah, somebody to volunteer. I mean, he paid for all the materials and everything like that.
Sure. But the labor
he
was...
put me up in the hotel, and I'm pretty sure he paid for my flights.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like God was like, this is for you. This is what you need to do.
And so, I'm sure living in the city and growing up, in the metro-ish, going there was just had you been to a third world country? Have you been out of the country at all?
Yeah, I mean, we had gone to Mexico. We flew through Mexico down to Costa Rica, and I think that was about the extent of my adventures
that you had prior.
Outside. Okay. Yeah.
But no mission work, or when you went to Mexico, you're saying...
No, the only mission stuff we did was like youth groups down to
yeah.
South Side Chicago.
And
we did some stuff in North
city.
Minneapolis and stuff like that when I was growing up.
But not seeing the level of
not,
poverty and
nothing down there.
And at that point, had the tsunami, right?
There was a earthquake in 2010.
Earthquake.
Yep, earthquake took out.
So that had
been
already happened.
And then there was a hurricane that took out the Southwest peninsula.
And that had happened prior to 2014.
There was a couple. There's been multiple earthquakes and hurricanes. I couldn't.
But enough where was the country already pretty much
it's
disheveled?
been that way for ever. In my opinion, everybody has a different opinion about it.
And again, right, your magnitude of scale at which you're seeing it, and it had been before and after, that's hard.
I mean, it's function. It was functional. They figured out how to do the best with what they had. And this all goes way back to when the slave revolt happened, because originally it was a French country. And they brought slaves over from West Africa, and the slaves revolted and beat the French out. And when that, in the midst of that they had a voodoo ceremony, in the Cascayan Woods, I think it was called. I read a book about it a long time ago, but they basically made an agreement with the devil that if you allow us to successfully revolt and take this country back, or not take it back but just take it over, we'll dedicate it to the devil. And dude, when I tell you that you can feel the darkness, the spiritual oppression, it's wild. It, in a way that people in America would never understand. Yeah. They've never experienced it. And even some of the people that go on missions trips
see glimpses of just the other stuff, but not the darkness.
Yeah, and we lived next to a witch doctor.
Yeah, right. I think you mentioned that last time.
Dude, when you live there long term, it's a totally different. Yeah, and the hard part is you have that, and then you also have just the incredible beauty of the people. Yeah. I could be walking down the street and, I could be like, hey, can I have your shirt? And they would gladly give it to you. You know what I mean? I had a buddy of mine that was dirt biking up in the mountains, and his dirt bike broke down, and his family brought him in and fed him the last of their food and gave him his, they were like, here, you sleep here tonight, and then we'll help you get the bike down the mountain tomorrow, and gave him his bed. It was a family of 7 people. They all slept on the dirt so he could sleep in the bed.
So where does that come from in a country dedicated to the enemy, in a world where you'd think, how does love thrive, and how is love, right? How is that a way of life? Isn't it survival? How were they able as a people to do that?
That's a fantastic question.
That just, to me, I think if you're not a believer, and sometimes, right, and if you're not living in it, even those that are lukewarm, it's it's a very selfish, life pursuit, right?
Yeah, and I think that at the same time, while the country had kind of had made this dedication, there's a lot of people there are a lot of people in the country who are believers, right? And they have lived so much of their life with nothing. They've lived so much of their life with nothing that when they have the opportunity to give, it means so much to them.
Wow.
To be in a place that they can do that. And so I think given the opportunity, they capitalize on it, but it's a wild.
But it's crazy though. Better it is to give than it is to receive, and some of that heart would even translate in a world that's oppressed and right. So does that mean, and again, created by God, by nature there's a love inside, right? A desire to love and serve and help others. But like, you think that spiritual warfare would just completely, and again, we serve a great God, so we are asking questions far outside of our our knowledge of good and evil. But dude, I can't even imagine. Okay, so where are we in all of this? Let's think. Key pieces. You went down there in 1819, and the business, you kind of shut things down. You're going to reestablish your means of providing was going to be, so you had a place to stay, but that was not the place you secured and ended up leaving from, because I know you had this nonprofit Canadian sort of relationship.
Yeah, so when we originally decided to move down there, we were going to move on to my uncle's property, and I made the decision. Everything was good. I announced it to all my customers that I was shutting down. I was going to be moving to Haiti. And then 2 days later, my uncle called and he said, "Hey, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for you to move on to our property."
And you're already, stuff was
ball's
planned.
already rolling,
yeah,
man.
you're going.
We're shutting down.
What was his reason?
He didn't want to make it too easy for us, if that makes any sense. He wanted us to have to raise the funds to figure out what we were doing. It had to be our thing. In the moment, I felt totally betrayed. I was like, God, what are you doing? I feel like you clearly led me here. I feel like you clearly called me. And then now all of a sudden, the ball's rolling and the rug's just ripped out from underneath us, And so then it was back to the drawing board. And that we were going to move down there. We were just going to help them. We were going to do odds and ends stuff, working on the property, helping host teams, all that kind of stuff. And out of that was birthed Jeremiah's Promise, which was the nonprofit that we ended up starting, based upon Jeremiah 29:11 through 13. And so had we gone down and lived at my uncle's place, this never would have been birthed, right? And so I just was talking to God and just trying to figure out where are we going? What are we doing? Why would you roll this rug out and then rip it out, and that out of that, like I said, birthed Jeremiah's Promise. And so then I realized I have so many skills that I could give, right? And so the whole ideology of, instead of giving a man a fish, teach him how to fish, right? And instead of giving them a hand out, giving them a hand up, and really trying to hand these skills over to them so that they could provide moving forward, instead of just giving them a job to, be security or cut the grass or, stuff like that.
Right.
So we started going through and figuring out what exactly we were going to do. And obviously I had a shop here, and I was like, there's a unbelievable need for a shop, down there. I mean, at that point when we went down there was 10,000 NGOs in Haiti. I mean, it was crazy. There's so many expats. But I was the only person on the north half of the country that had and knew how to utilize a scan tool. I was the only person that had a lift up until a year and a half into being there, and then another guy opened up a shop. There was one other American mechanic that I knew of that had an actual repair shop, he was down in Port-au-Prince, and so Cap Haitian's the second largest city, so he's in Port, the largest city, and I was up in Cap, and I mean, he was like months and months and months behind. I mean, from sourcing parts.
I was going to say,
just,
parts,
oh
like if you had a regular part, right? People would prolong their repairs, I'm sure, right? Eat through their brakes, rotors, the whole nine. Like, you're far too long. Well, it's going to be a month to get parts. How long would it take to get parts?
I could get parts from Qatar in less than 7 days. I figured out, I was in the auto parts business for like 7 years before I started my own shop.
Okay.
And so I got really good at sourcing parts, just something that I had learned. And so I started digging in and figuring out DHL was a big player down in Haiti, like it is in the rest of the world, other than the U.S. Right?
It's interesting, right?
It is. It really is. So if I needed to order something from the U.S., there was a nonprofit airline that would fly stuff down.
Wow.
But I had to order it, have it shipped to them.
Yep.
They had to
consolidate
package
it, I'm sure,
they
and
had
bring
to,
it with other stuff.
Yep, exactly. And then they would bring down the plane. And sometimes, if it showed up Tuesday at noon, it had to be there by 11. I wouldn't get it till the next week, or if they were overweight, depending on what it was.
And then you have to call back the customer to bring their vehicle in.
No, people would
leave it.
It was really interesting. I was basically the only shop that people would leave their cars at.
Oh,
down there.
They had this feeling of,
they had trust.
This American.
Yeah, exactly. Like any other place they would bring it, the drivers would drive it there, and then they would pay the guy to sit and watch them repair it.
Wow.
Because they would just take other parts off the cars. They would swap something out with a used broken one and say, "Oh, well, this is broken too, so we need to replace that now." And then they would sell you your good one back.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it was nuts, man. So anyways, yeah. So I figured out there was a couple of places in Australia, in the UK, and then in Qatar
that you could source.
I could source and DHL it. And
bring the parts in, the vehicle there, get the job done, move on. So you started to come together. That Jeremiah's promise, though, was that independent of going down then to, for I know the plans I have for you, right? Not to hold on. Not to harm you, to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope in the future, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's sort of affirming there's a plan, there's a will for you to prosper you, not to harm you. We're going to trust God in this. Jeremiah's promise as a nonprofit then for you was going to be setting up this shop then?
Yeah, so it was business as missions.
Yep, got it. Yep.
And so I believe in sustainable mission
for
work,
sure.
And we raised about half of our income came from support, from donations, and the other half came from the work that we did. So we had the auto repair shop where we would do repairs, just like taking
paying customers, but not enough to cover expenses in life. Correct. Right? So you had to subsidize some of it.
Exactly.
Got it.
And the plan was that the first 3 to 5 years that we would subsidize with donations, and then we would grow the business to the point where we no longer needed it. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And then we also got into teaching welding and doing structural steel work. And so we would build trusses for buildings and stuff like that, build some platforms, some other random steel architectural type stuff. So
really just identifying the need, the opportunity, the skill, the ability to bring people together.
Yep.
And again, this is why I love this, because the whole idea, and we've talked about the stewardpreneur word, right? And being a steward and being an entrepreneur. Been working on massaging where I want this definition to go, but it really comes down to doing the right things with what we've been given, or doing the right things the right way to make a greater impact. And and a lot of times entrepreneurs, that's what we're doing. We're leveraging the resources that exist, and it's people, sometimes technology, sometimes just the know-how and the connection, right? And when you start putting those things together, it's just a giant puzzle, and it's this fits here. Right. And that takes a special someone, right? And so you went down there with this plan to be kind of secure, a place to live, a little more comfortable, to sorry, it's not going to work. What did he end up doing then? Did he just said, I want to make this harder for you, more or less? Or was it you know what, I have other plans, there's not a space for you anymore?
No, he just literally said it's not going to work. If you want to come down here, you'll have to figure it out.
And the work, you weren't planning to do work necessarily for him anymore at this point. You
No,
had
at that
already
point,
done that.
it was
You were
over.
just there
Yeah.
to borrow from him now a place to live until you could figure it out.
We were gonna build a little house on their property, and we were basically going to take care of the property. We were going to, they were hosting teams. They'd have 20, 30 people coming in, and so we would help turn the beds. We would help
facilitate that. Yep.
Whatever
Host.
came up,
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. We can go out and help on other little projects that he was doing, whatever it was, we were gonna. But I realized that if we had done that,
all this other stuff,
and all the future dreams never would have come.
So,
right?
So I think that's the meat and potatoes, because you end up staying there. You intended to stay there. You said 3 to 5 years in an earlier conversation about the plan.
Right. That was that was 3 to 5 years was the point at which we would become financially independent and not have to depend upon donors. But I had little to no intention of coming back.
So this is where you felt God had led you. You're bringing the family there. Yep. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers yet, but we're going to make a new home. And you have young kids,
right? And
you're trusting God. But so then it ended up being 2 years. And where did that gap kind of get filled in with, hey, I guess the transition from the aha moment of why you were there, why it's time to leave, and what you learned, like in the whole, if you were to just summarize the whole experience, right? You felt called there. You didn't stay as long as you hoped to, but you did a whole bunch more other things you never expected to do.
Right.
So there's a purpose for that, right?
Yep.
I'm sure there was some prospering and some dreaming that had happened through that and some lessons learned.
Yep.
But if you were to just summarize that season of life with your family, trusting God, your wife not really finding her place, ready to go home, and then actually going home to restart. Like, how would you summarize that whole era? Because I'm like, I don't know if he's coming or going, or like if you hear this story, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I think that it's the epitome of faith. I mean, we had agreed to be there for like 5 years and then reassess about going forward. I had no intention of coming home. Sometimes we get these ideas and visions from God, and then we stop seeking God, and we say, well, this is what he told us we should do. Mm-hmm. The problem is that I feel like he will lead us, and then we have to never stop seeking.
It's like, right? Light bulb, and then we go, we're gonna go, but we forget to keep checking in with him.
Exactly. It's like you're running down this path in the woods, and there's 100 trails going off of it, and you're just going straight, and you got your blinders on, and you're just running, and God's like, what are you doing? You were supposed to turn. You were, and
he got you to the woods. He got you to where the trails were, but now it's like, well, now you need to stay closer.
You do. Yeah, exactly. And you have to constantly be seeking him in order to figure out where the twists and turns are going to be. Because the reality is that there will be. Yeah, there always will be, And so when we got, in 2018, we came home for Christmas, and we got a letter FedEx to us from the Canadian organization that we had partnered with. And they basically just said, hey, we're killing the agreement that we had, and you've got 60 days to be off our property. And we had nowhere to go. And looking back on it now, I mean, it was like God totally ripped us out of there. And it was his perfect timing, right? I wouldn't have gone voluntarily. But it birthed something so much greater that, if we'd have stuck around for a couple more years, I don't even know if I'd still be married. We just about lost our marriage coming home anyways. And so when we got that letter, I opened it up, I read the whole thing. My wife was sitting on the couch. I threw it at her, and I walked out of the house. And this is middle of December in Minnesota, it's freezing cold out. And I just walked outside, and I was just screaming at God,
just pissed,
because it's we just invested tens of thousands of dollars. We're literally 95% of the way done building our house. We had stuck a bunch of our own money, donor money, borrowed a bunch of money to try and get the house complete, Had no idea what we were going to do. I mean, we came home just for like a month for like respite,
holidays, right? Yeah.
Brought some backpacks home, but we lived in the Caribbean, and
all your
it's
stuff is
December in
there.
Minnesota.
Right.
Yeah. Everything. I mean, everything, including the kitchen sink. I mean, like all my tools, all my equipment, my toolboxes, everything like that. And so, I had no idea what I was going to do, because I talked to a mentor of mine, and he said, it got to the point finally that we made the decision. We had looked at like, maybe we'll move, to a different site down in Haiti. We'll restart. And it finally just came to the point where, no, we're done. We're moving home.
But that process allowed you to sort of expose the scam that had been happening with this organization.
Yeah, we were like the fifth partner.
And did you make extra noise at this point?
Oh, we made a ton of noise.
And so do you think part of that unlocked and unraveled that bag of tricks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's obviously a part of me that feels like God put me in that position knowing that I would do that, and I would expose these people. Yeah, right. It's like,
that's what I would do. Like, this is wrong. Like, there's a principal point here.
Right.
Man.
Yeah. Two faith-based organizations, and one has a track record of taking advantage of other people. And so it was sad, but his whole board, I think I told you the story of, we went back and forth for months, and finally his board realized that the founder had been pulling the wool over their eyes, and
this isn't the first one, right?
This was not the first one. And so they pulled up their own personal cash. They reimbursed us like 3 cents on the dollar, 30 cents on the dollar maybe. And they paid us out of their own pocket, not out of ministry funds. And then they all resigned.
Unreal. So then closing out this whole chapter, then you're there, you get the letter, figure out, like, you end up going back as a family, or just you?
No,
just you. Yeah. So basically to settle up and be done.
Yeah. Pack everything up, and we actually ended up moving it all. My uncle and my mom and a couple other people ended up doing the bulk of the moving, because I was back here in the States.
Wow.
And I emptied our house and like packed it all up and put it into the container. We had shipping containers down there, and then my uncle did, he said, well, we can build a shop now, like after we had been there for a couple of years and like had kind of rebuilt, and he had seen what we had walked through, and he's like, okay, that's cool. Like, let's put the shop at my house. And so we built a new 2020. Well, let's back up. So in like March of 19, we had decided to, I had been down there cleaning out the house, and I was looking at other properties to see if we could move it somewhere. And I was flying home, and I was in the airport talking to a guy. There was lightning storm, so we were all stuck in Charlotte and couldn't get out. And I was talking to the guy, and he told me he was going to Greece, and I told him, man, my 10-year anniversary is next year. Like, I'd love to take my wife to Greece. We've talked about it. And he goes, oh, don't take her to Greece. He says, you got to take her to Zambia.
That's right.
And I said, yeah, I don't think you understand what I just put my wife through. Like, there's no way for my 10-year anniversary, my wife's going to Zambia. Ain't happening. And there won't be a 10th anniversary if I tell her that's where we're going anyways. And so we start chatting about Zambia and all this kind of stuff. It was a wild conversation. It was late Saturday night. I got home at like 1 a.m, got up Sunday morning with the fam, went to church, and there was a guest speaker from Zambia at church that day. And I just, like, all these crazy connections, and like middle of worship, I just, like, I had to sit down. I was getting this insane download from God that you're right where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. You need to come home. I brought you home for a reason. And it even talks about in Jeremiah about bringing the people back from exile. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I got this crazy download that we will go to Zambia. We're going to build a school in Zambia, and we're going to build one in Ukraine, and we're going to build one in Mexico. But for right now, like, your family and your wife, they need stability and they need security, and you're going to get that here. And you're going to start a new business here in the States, and it's going to be the economic engine that funds and fuels your the future of the ministry. And so,
dude, I know when you shared that with me the first time, I was like, and then the business partner opportunity connection came through some of this.
Yeah, that day.
Yeah, that day.
Yeah.
And so, had you built these schools yet now? No. Okay, so this is still part of now with a grander vision that God continues to unravel. So, dude, even again, so this is where I get to a point of just sitting down with dudes and talking. But so that coming back, building the business, setting it up for a success that would allow the engine to be the repairs, the business itself, the profits to fuel and fund the future iteration of, are you going to call it Jeremiah's Promise?
No, it's Journey Ministries.
The Journey Ministries.
Yep.
Clearly lots of journey in the midst of it. But to summarize, coming out of that, because there's still an unwritten story, right?
Yep.
So how do you summarize the in and the out and what God did for you and your family for that season? If you were to look back and say, when I think of these couple of years, what did it teach me? What did it teach you?
Holy cow. Never doubt God's faithfulness. We moved home with literally like a couple backpacks and suitcases, and we had sold everything. I sold all my cars. We sold the house. We sold everything
when you
before
went there,
we moved.
Planned not to come back, right?
Wow. And we shipped a shipping container with all the tools and all our house. Literally everything was gone. My dad had kept our family home, and so it was just him. It's a huge house and nothing, so there's more than enough room for us to all live there. And he let us live there for free. And we had sold my brother our like old Suburban, and that was just sitting around. So he let us use that for a couple of months. Somebody from our church gave us a van that needed a bunch of work, but I knew a guy, and actually there was a bunch of work that I couldn't do because I didn't have tools for it. And another shop owner here in Minnesota that I knew said, just drop it off. We'll take care of everything.
Oh, wow.
And so they totally hooked it up. And then, the business, it's just crazy, man. So I got home from church that day and I started looking online for places to rent, to start a new shop, looking for places to buy all kinds of stuff. And I found a place for sale, and I had texted one of my buddies because he had hit me up like 2-3 weeks earlier and said, hey man, I want to chat. And he wanted to get out of his place and he wanted to start his own company. And we had always talked about starting a shop together. And so I hit him up and we went and had coffee the next day, and I was telling him about the vision and just like the download and all kinds of stuff, and telling him about, I found the shop for sale. And he's like, hold on. And he like pulled out his phone and he was like, is this the guy who listed it? And it was listed by a business broker, and come to find out that like my buddy knew him and they were in a networking group together, and he had told him about this same place for him to buy it. And I was like, dude, we need to go talk to him. Long story short, the shop, we didn't end up buying that shop. We bought a different shop that was temporarily listed for like 30 days just to so the broker could, throw it out on the market and see if anybody would bite. Yeah. And we told the broker like our entire story. We had I had no money. I was, tens of thousands of dollars in debt still because we were trying to figure things out. Yeah. And we were in between. And so we ended up going to look at our main store down in New Hope, and we talked to the owner. It was father and son, told them our whole story, told them everything. We ended up making a deal with them. And one of the big things, we were touring the shop, and there was a toolbox there that said LWCC Car Care, or Car Ministry or something on the side of it. And I was like, what is that? And I'd just been talking to my partner about how I want to make sure that we utilize this shop to help people with, fixing their cars or whatever. And maybe we, do a once a month thing where we fix people's cars for free on a Saturday or something. Well, this shop already had that going.
Oh my gosh.
They were connected with Living Word and Living Word Car Care. And so once a month, one Saturday a month, they would come in and they would people would apply through the church, and they had a bunch of guys from church that come down and fix their cars up, and still to this day,
So you kept that.
Yeah,
you kept that portion of it.
Yep.
Unreal.
One Saturday a month. So, and they they gave us everything we needed. All the specialty tools I lost in Haiti, totally replaced. They gave me a full-blown, they had a fire like years ago, and so they had an extra toolbox full of tools. Some of them were like semi-melted, but like gave me everything. The only thing I had was like one of those little plastic Craftsman, 200-piece mechanic tool set. That's what I was bringing to work every day. It's like I got my lunch pail and my toolbox.
Here's everything in a box.
Here's everything I got. That's all I got left, And so God just like totally everything we lost was given back to us. And then in 21 we had the opportunity to buy my dad's house, the house I grew up in. And you talk about losing everything, and like we got the house back and 100% furnished, full kitchen, everything, all my woodworking tools that I had taken to Haiti and left there. Like my dad had 2 of those, and
replaced it, right?
Everything
and some.
Everything and some,
And your businesses now are doing well and booming, and kind of we talked through.
Yeah, so that was in 21, and then in 22, at the end of 21, early 22, my business partner and I, we had been friends since we were little kids, and we made an agreement when we first started that if the business ever got in the way, if that was going to end the friendship, that we would end the partnership first. And that was a really difficult decision to make, and it's taken a few years to, but we're amicable. We still talk to each other. But I bought him out in May of 2022, trying to keep all these dates straight. Yeah, it was like May of 22, we finalized the sale, and I bought him out. Dude, that was a whole nother crazy God story about how funding all worked. I mean, it was like the 11th hour of how all that came together. Putting all the pieces together, yeah.
To see his side of it sort of be acquired by yours, to sort of then get him the funding and kind of create that amicable separation.
Yeah, and it was like in the midst of like all the end stages of all the COVID financing, and we were trying to figure stuff out with the banks. And I mean, it was literally like 2 days before we closed. I had no idea how I was going to pay. I don't know how I was going to write the check, but I knew God.
It came together.
It did.
Wow.
It absolutely did.
Dude,
and and like 6 weeks after we bought my dad's house, we got this cabin out in Wisconsin that one of my wife's best friends was at our house, found out her dad was selling the family cabin she grew up in, and is there anything we can do for you? And she goes, yeah, buy the cabin. And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. Just
let's just write the check.
No problem. Fresh business owner, just moved back from Haiti, like scraped together to buy my dad's house. And again, like God totally worked that out and put all the pieces together. So not only did we get like our house fully furnished, everything ready to go, like everything that we had lost had been replaced, but then God doubled that, and like cabin, dock, fishing poles, you name it, everything. I mean, he even left like his old, flannels and sweatshirts and sleeping bags. Gosh. And I mean, you name it, it was there, everything that we would need, minus the boat.
Yeah.
And, so it was just crazy how God put all that stuff together. So I bought my partner out in 22. And then my landlord at that time approached me in November and said, hey, do you want to buy the building? And I was like, wow, there's no, I'd love to buy the building. Who doesn't want to be in commercial real estate, right? He said, well, can you close by the end of the year? I'm like, Joe, that's like 5 weeks from now. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get bank financing, everything put together. And I said, if you own or finance it, I'll buy it. I said, he goes, all right, no problem. Okay. Like,
so what's the next step, right?
Yeah, right. Like, what's next, and so we came up with a down payment, which was like probably a quarter of what I would have had to put down if I bank financed it. My payment was literally the same amount I was paying rent on. He's like, let's just keep it the same, that way you're good. And I was like, okay, great. So that was 22, and then 23, I got approached about buying another shop. up in Andover, and that one from March through November was like crazy up and down. It was supposed to happen in September, and that all fell through. And then another deal in October, and that one fell through. And then the original one came back on the table, and so I ended up buying a second store November of 23, and then closed on the building January of this year on that one. So
yeah, so that now has been going just seven months or so.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And where was it at in terms of not location physically, but in terms of its shape and readiness for you had to take, the existing recipe that had been working. How are you in that transition journey now?
That's a fantastic question. So it only had 2 employees, desperately needed leadership. And so we came in, almost on day one, doubled sales. It still needs a lot of work. I did not do a great job of transitioning from being a single store operator to a multi-store operator. I'd never done it, had no idea what I was doing, and I'm learning a lot from it. And it's crazy. I felt like everything was going good. We were making the right moves. I felt like God had called, I felt like God had put this in my lap, and and then this spring I'm just like, what in the world did I get myself into? This was right around the time that we met. I was like, I felt like the world, I felt my world was falling apart. I had been successful, and I was, income was, moving in the right direction, and, ministry. So we have a ministry where we give cars away. We've given, I think, 42 cars away now. And we were going through like a really long dry spell where we weren't getting any cars donated to us. And so like we hadn't given a car away in like 6 months. And I felt lost, and I was at church, and our pastor was talking about like the importance of reading your Bible every day, and I'm like, at the age of 37, you would think that I had, would have read the Bible, but I've never read the Bible.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. It's like, yeah, so, ADHD, I don't know what it is, but just reading in general, but then to sit down and read the word, but yeah.
Yeah, so for the last like 4 months, I have 2 chapters every day. That's it. 2 chapters. So I started in Proverbs, and I made it through Proverbs and Isaiah, and I'm now going through, I'm sure I missed a book. Yeah, Song of Solomon. Yeah. And I'm in the last bit of Jeremiah. Some of those, like Lamentations, those are brutal. Like, and even Jeremiah, I'm like, man, God is gruesome. Like the things he says he's going to do to these people, that he did to these people. But anyways, so, yeah, man, I started getting into the word, and just, kind of like when I was in Haiti and I had my blinders on and I was just running forward and just not seeking God, and felt lost. I felt distanced. I felt like there was distance growing between my wife and I again, and it was just off. And so just really focusing in and centering myself on Scripture has been super important and super helpful. And then I really felt like we had turned a corner in business, and things were really starting to ramp up and go really well again. And then I lost my lead tech at the end of May.
Oh, wow. Sheepers.
He ended up taking his own life, and
that's right.
It's like the craziest, most difficult thing I've ever had to walk through. I've walked through it before, but never as the owner and leader of a company, and you got 10, 15 employees that are all looking at you like, what's next? And I'm like, I have no idea, and, so I sat down and I was like, okay, God, this does not make any sense. He's the highest producing guy in the company. 40% of our revenue came from him.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, now what? And I just felt like God was like, stay faithful, and you need to like push these guys, not push them, but like you need to be bolder in your faith, and I need to be bolder in sharing it, and I need to be bolder in and just open about it with my employees and with just anyone and everyone
Life's
that
short,
I come
right?
in. Life is so short, and we can sit here and wonder like, oh, could I have done this? Should I have done this?
Always.
Whatever. I mean, that's just going to be the reality. But what I can do every day is be bolder and sharing that,
which you can control. Yeah.
Which I can control.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it takes the experiences of seeing God working and trusting him that he will continue to show up, and you've seen that. And so as you look back, hindsight's 2020. We don't always still understand why he took us down the path he did, but when we continue to look back, we're reminded, and so it gives us the courage to look forward and maybe not know the answers, but to your point, full circle, to trust that he has you on that path. And so how can that impact me right now? And it's bringing that hope, right? It's bringing that level of faith. It's bringing that realness, because no one can contend what it's done in your own life, right? And for me, to know in your mind, to know in your heart, and then to live it out, those are all very distinctly different, right? We can have the head knowledge we want, but not wholeheartedly, right, be on board, to be all in. And then on top of that, our actions are dead. Our faith actions are dead without the work we do, right? And so we need actions for faith to exist. And so it's this ongoing, God, what are you teaching me right now? So what have you learned seeing that circumstance happen as a leader, as a business owner, as a believer? Because now you have 13, 14 other employees, and I'm sure many of them not believers, some of them are, but how has your style changed? How has your encouragement changed? How have you been able to see them as individuals and really shine the light of Jesus into their own lives in your workplace now?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because we're going through a transition right now where we're redoing some of our core values. We're redoing the core values of the company, right? And one of a couple of them are alignment and stewardship and uncommon. Those are 3 out of the 5. And in terms of alignment, like, I have to check myself on a regular basis. Are my actions in alignment with my beliefs and the words that are coming out of my mouth, right? And like, in terms of like the situation we just walked through, I have to know and understand that not everybody grieves with hope, and grieving with hope is so much different than the way that our world oftentimes grieves, and because I've been through so much stuff. I've been through loss. I've been through, marriage struggles. I've been through, child struggles, I've been through all these different pieces, my own hellion raisin times and going through, the legal system and all that kind of stuff. Like, it all ends up like, I can look back and say, okay, God used all this, right? And so I have hope. And like, how without that faith, without that hope, I have no idea how some people walk through life. Like, I have hope that God's going to use this situation, whether it's in my life, in our company, in his family's life, in his children's lives. Like, God's going to use it in some way, shape, or form. I know that. I trust that. Like, it's how God works, That's
and so, the literal definition, though, of faith. It's the confidence in what we hope for, right? And the assurance of what we cannot see. And isn't it funny how the faith, by default, is almost there after going back and just looking through all the examples you just said, and not everyone has had those trials, and not everyone is prepared as you are, right? And so now that alignment piece, your actions based on what you believe better be aligned, because you might be the only word of hope you're able to encourage these people with, right? Some of these folks may not have that same experience, and so how has that changed the way you see them as not just employees but people? What have you had to done specifically to create more alignment in that?
So we've been we've been talking about doing like all company trainings,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do this. This is gonna be great. And then we like do one, and then we stop and don't do it. And I said, this is something that we have to be consistent in. And we had one meeting, and in between our first and second meeting, Matt passed away. And so our second meeting, I was like, literally days after we announced, we found out on Friday and announced it to the staff. And another piece of alignment, right? Like my wife was like, no, I'm coming to the stores with you, and we are going to be a unified front, and we're going to pray over the staff, and we are going to we're going to walk through this with them, and that was huge. Some of them, most aligned my wife and I have been in a long time.
Incredible.
And so that was Friday. Tuesday's our next staff meeting. I was like, oh, crap, what are we going to do, And so I talked to them about grieving with hope, and I read scripture, and we talked through it. We prayed about it, had the next one. And I'm like, okay, how do I bring faith? How do I bring my interviews now? I sit them down and I show them our core values, and our last one I list out, I said, we're uncommon. I said, I am a man of faith. You need to know that. We make our decisions based upon faith and my relationship with God. There is worship music playing in the stores. You don't have to have faith to work here. I said, but you're going to be exposed to it. And if you don't want to be around it, I 100% support you in that. That's your decision. But you need to know that we are a faith-based company,
That's great, man.
And I think a lot of that comes, we, two of my business coaches are super vocal about their faith. You think about Chick-fil-A and, they were not bashful about their faith. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And so why wouldn't I be?
Right.
Why wouldn't I speak up and let people know that and bring it into our meetings? And, if I see something in my devotions that pops out at me, I'll literally snap a picture of my Bible and I will text it to our entire staff group chat. And I say, reading this in our devotions this morning. And there was one that hit one day. It was reading through Proverbs, and it was about the car ministry. Proverbs 3:27, do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. And I think about, it's in our power to act. It's in our power to donate these cars. It's in our power to support our staff, our guys' family, there's a lot of things that we can do. And so just, I guess for me, just being super vocal about it.
Well, a piece of stewardship, though, right? That's kind of pulls that in.
That's another piece of it.
Being able to recognize individuals' unique abilities and contributions, and recognizing that for much is given, much is expected. And so this circumstance, however difficult it may be, it's happening in you're in the role that you're in your company. And so that's not by accident. And so what are you going to do about it? Right. It's that constant, alignment around those core values that require us to audit our actions, the difference between the man we want to be, the man we were, and each day we have that ability to influence those people that are wondering those same questions. What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose in all of this? How does work fit into this? And, why me, God, right? And some of that lies answers, but some of that is just how we live and creates hope.
Well, and not only is it that we have the opportunity to do so, I truly believe that us as entrepreneurs, as leaders within community, home, whatever, we are called to steward the people that God has put into our lives, right? And so that's what, it's one of our core values for a reason. You know what I mean? You look at the parable of the talents, right?
100%. And my favorite.
Dude, I love that parable. And, God has given us, God-given talents, and the monetary coin, a talent, it's the exact same root words, right? And so
the denarius, right, is the coin, but the talent, that word is what we've been given by him, which, by the way, it's all his, right? So the difference is, it's if I'm the servant, right, and the master has given me something, what do we do if we're entrusted with someone else's stuff? We often try to take better care of it than it is of our own, right?
Yep.
And so that mentality of stewardship, being given a little because you're only responsible or accountable for a little, but for those that have been given much, much is required. And dude, you took the words out of my mouth when you went down this path of parables. So what are you learning from that as it's challenging you to stand more in that faith, because you're recognizing your unique position that no one else is equipped for or in position to influence them, right? Because that's part of that stewardship. It's not yours to hold for yourself, right? It's all God's, and so you have to be obedient in order to act that way. What is that teaching you about? Because I just fascinated, like, this is in your workplace, and that's an element that which I'm all for, bringing biblical principles into the workplace. But then you have this other dichotomy of the people that know us the best are the people at our home, like our children and our wives, right? And so I found myself sometimes at odds with wanting to be so mission focused that the hypocrite is easily exposed, because we're tired, we're weary, we're working hard, we're focused on so many other things in the kingdom and in our business that we go home, those that we love the most aren't getting the best of us. And so that stewardship doesn't end because we're at home. It actually should be larger, because
start at home,
right? So and I've been wanting to ask this too, like, through this journey, your daughters and your wife, and the person you were, the person you are now, the trials that your wife and your daughters saw you experience as a husband and a father, how has it shaped their faith? How has it shaped your relationship with them? Sounds like the alignment has increased with your wife, but what about your daughters, and what about just the other things that the Lord is revealing to you, for much is given, for you to step up in those areas, because I agree, like, oh, let's go do this with everything we got. But then what happens? We trade off some other thing that breaks, or over here, it doesn't get the attention it deserves over there, right? So how is that pendulum swung? And then how has it encouraged you to sort of evaluate those other areas?
Yeah, the interesting thing for me is, like, doing it at work is so easy.
I know, right?
So much easier, in my opinion, because I'm like, listen, you don't like it, get it, like, just find another job. I don't know.
Right. There's an authority that's different.
100%.
A choice, and you don't have choices in your children, and you like to think you have a choice in your marriage, but if you're committed to our marriage, it's not even an option, right? So it's like, this is a different situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're at work, like, you can step away and, like, go and blow off steam and, like, calm yourself down. Like, when you're at home, like, you're not just gonna, like, walk out of the house.
You're in the thick of it.
You're in the thick of it, and so but like you said, like, it is super important to steward what you've been given, and the blessings. I think oftentimes I have some friends of mine, a couple different people who really struggle to have children, and some of them who still don't have children, and I almost get, like, I'm, like, super frustrated. I'm like, oh, why did I have 4 girls? Like, God, I just wanted a son, and yet I've got friends who doesn't matter. They just want a kid, and so why? I mean, I looked at my wife and got her pregnant with twins on our wedding day. Literally wedding night twins, and so it's like, why don't I cherish that?
Right.
Right. And they're, they are my daughters. I believe that it is a role and responsibility of mine to teach them how a man should treat them. Not only by how I treat them, but also how I treat their mother. Right. And so in terms of stewardship, like, on the home front, I have tried to become more and more intentional about serving them, and specifically when it comes to my marriage, I've focused more time and energy on my marriage than I have on my children. Mm-hmm. My kids are all aware that I love their mother more than I love them. Mm-hmm. And whether they understand it or not, we make that known.
But at a minimum, that communication, by the way, is fantastic. Like it sounds odd, right? Like I've actually literally said, I want you guys to know that I love your mother more than I love you guys. I'm sorry, but that'll never change. And they're like, well, but
you don't love me?
Like, yeah, right? It's funny how what they hear, what they want to hear in that. Yeah. But it's so true, because God says love God, love others, make disciples. But in that is love your wife as Christ loved the church, and it's the order of operations, right? Yep. And so we sometimes get so far in this other world of loving our career and our obligations to provide that we're blinded by the core responsibility of, we take for granted even, right? The fact that we have children and others have struggled to be able to have one. And so it's this abundance and scarcity mindset, and this thing we take it for granted is, we have it, I guess it's just what it is, instead of like, these are truly blessings that we should absolutely cherish and love and enjoy, right? So what has that done for you?
So I take it back to the whole parable of the talents. Like, I am so obsessed with that parable, and I look at, am I training my girls up well? Am I stewarding the time that I have with them? Am I training them up? Am I making them into disciples? If they are a talent, that if they are something that God has given me, and I'm not honoring them and I'm not blessing them, I have these dreams and visions of having grandchildren and a big, beautiful family, and God can literally just be like, nope, and end it. And so I don't know, this year, growing up for me, I was big into camping, and our family, we just we couldn't afford to go, to Vail and go skiing, or,
camping is, a way to, vacation,
family vacation, going to the Boundary Waters, going up to Duluth and stuff like that. And, I took my wife camping one time. It was an absolute disaster, and she refuses to ever go camping again. And so I committed for my twins' birthday this year. I bought them sleeping bags and camping chairs, and I bought them all the gear to go camping. And so that's one way I am will be intentional with them this year. We've also in the last year, my middle daughter got a medical diagnosis that has really kind of shaken the family, I guess. It's taken up a ton of resources, both time and financial. And when one of your kids gets sick, you just don't care anymore. In the sense of I'll do anything and everything I have to do. Importance
becomes a really a new word to understand, right? It puts it in perspective.
Yep. Yeah. So even the other night, she was apologizing to me for the amount of money that we've spent, and she's like, it doesn't matter how much money you spend, it's not going to get any better. I'm never going to get better. I'm never, and I'm like, listen, I'll spend my last dime on you if I have to, and it's been a really challenging, look at all the things that I've walked through, and the points in time where I've had to be totally dependent upon God for my faith. And part of me is has she never seen that? Because she's not walking with the level of faith that I would normally walk with, and so for me, it's honoring that relationship with God by continuing to not push her towards that, but to encourage her to pray, encouraging her to journal. Journaling's been huge for me, my daily journals. And so trying to, number one, probably the most important thing for me is leading by example at home. I get up in the morning, we have a pot of coffee, and mom and dad have their devotional time,
That's good.
And I remember for years, my wife was like, must be nice, like have your quiet time. And the kids, she's like, I can't hardly like, walk through the house without them hanging all over me, and I'm like, I straight up told her, I was like, that's on you. You're not putting your foot down. You're not making it known that this is your quiet time and they need to stay away, And she's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, try it. Put your foot down, And now, granted, our children are, our youngest is 7, almost 8. And so obviously it's gotten easier as they've become more independent. But, I'll walk in the living room or something like that in the morning. I'll say, hey, where's mom? She's doing her, having her time upstairs. All right, cool. And they know 90% of the time, like, you don't interrupt mom and dad when mom and dad are having their devotions, and so they're seeing that. Now, there's a part of me, like you talk about success earlier and about how it's like, it's such a blanket statement and it's so vague and it looks different to everybody. And, there's a piece of me that's like, well, I'm unsuccessful on the home front in terms of that because my kids don't do devotions every day and my kids aren't journaling every day and they should be. And, I've got all these these pie in the sky dreams 100%. Of what I want it to look like, and yet at the dinner table, they fight about who's going to pray, and it's like World War III if we don't go to church on Sunday because they want to volunteer in nursery. Like, and so I can see the fruits of my actions, right? And there's also ways that I need to keep stepping up every single day, you know? And so...
Dude, that's awesome. And I feel you because we have these preconceived notions of what our children's faith should look like. And just because we are and what we feel and what we think is that, it's almost like we expect it through osmosis that they would be there with us, that they would experience it. And we all realize, and at some point, we sometimes hardly even know ourselves, right? Let alone our wives and our children and then, the rest of the people. But we that's the difference. The people in our workplace is a very small context at which we expose most of us to whom we are, right? And then over here we have the all of us portion, and what they don't see is that business portion. And so we start to think about, that plays into our physical, our mental, emotional, our spiritual health, our relational health. And you start looking at that pendulum swinging in the imbalances, like, man, but part of it just starts with that heart for our children and wanting them to pursue God the way you want them to pursue God, and then coming to terms with, wait, it's my responsibility to help them understand that priority, to understand that importance. Why is it not clear to them? Well, that thought alone has brought you to the path of saying, well, I can influence that. And then when I have those thoughts, I woulda, shoulda, coulda, I go, praise God that they haven't left my house yet. There's still time.
Right.
And I've had, like my wife, whenever she says, I wish, or I could have, or we should have, I say, but there's still today and there's still tomorrow. And there's not going to be that forever. Right. And so I think as men, we often really get so focused on what we know how to do, and we go put our time and effort in to know what we know how to do, and whether it's fix cars or building businesses or both. Right. And, we kind of cloud out the rest of it, but then we discover through all these challenges that our faith is actually fundamental. But the fundamentals need to be taught, just like anyone going to play sports, just like you're going to do anything, that those fundamentals of raise your children in the way that they should go, because when they get old, they won't depart from it, right? It's straight from Scripture. And so I've been there because I recall saying, we need to do more. We need to do this or this or that. And there is time, but time is running out, but that intentionality. So I've been starting to like, well, if I just do it every time I remember, that's not a very good system. And so I've had to create a lot of systems, especially for the ADHD brain, in different various ways in my life to do the things I want to do. And one of those things are with my family are having intentional conversations, with each of them. And I was sitting right here with another gentleman, great, awesome podcast I think he has 5. Doesn't have all girls, but similar to me, girls and one boy. I'm opposite, 4 boys and 1 girl with 5. And part of what, you and I met at Wild at Heart and kind of coming full circle with that is understanding that God the Father, right, what he wants from a son or from his child, it. This is my son whom which I'm well pleased. And so a child or a daughter or a son wants to please their father, and that's our job. And so if we understand that relationship and realize our own brokenness as a father, that we're creating traumas that they aren't aware of now, but will be, right? But we're living in the real time to go, wait, what are those traumas that they could potentially be getting? How do I take that responsibility now to remove that bad trend, And so what I've learned in that weekend is being able to be intentional around the type of husband I want to be, and for my children to see that, and to be intentional around my children knowing that they're loved, because sometimes those little tiny things, as we saw throughout those videos, the fractured boy in us stays because we never learned this particular area of our life, the Father's love that we needed. And so we put on this posing hat, right? This poser shows up. And until we uncover that poser is really just a byproduct of insecurity, and not really recognizing that there's nothing we can or can't do to take away the love from him, but we can apply it now as a way of reconciling our own traumas. And that's the thing, as I'm hearing this, recalling the story with Morgan Schneider, I think it is, right? Yep. Talking about he's able to relive some of these moments that he didn't get to have as a son, but now doing them as a father in a whole unique way. And that just wrecked me, man, because the guy that was sitting here full circle now was talking about, my kids will never not know that they were loved, because every night I ask them a question. I ask them, each of them is a habit and a routine. I ask you a question. Have I told you that I loved you? Or is it, do you know how much I love you? Do you know that I love you as a son? Do you know that I'm proud of you? Like, basically a series of 3 questions, and he starts it as 1. And these are the things that we just want to hear from our Father, that they love us and that they're proud of us, yep. Right? And so if we take that simple approach in our own marriage and our own parenting, and being interested in them, and the Father being willing to just let them know that they're loved, is like light years away, right? From the things sometimes that we think are so important. I wish they would do this, but if they just understood love, unconditional love, like what you said, no amount of money, whatever it takes, I will be here to make sure. Don't worry about the money and your sickness. You are the most important, right? So when my child starts talking about their deficiencies or their problems with this or mental health or emotional or whatever, the facts of it basically come back to, I just lost my train of thought. The idea of unreal. Being loved. I think it's interesting because at Wild at Heart, I grew up always feeling as though I had a great childhood and a great father, mm-hmm. and I was comparing it to friends of mine, whose dads, were totally absent, or if they were present, they were drunk and mm-hmm. they would hit, they were mm-hmm. abusive, and but I realized throughout that weekend that while my dad was present, while he was there, he wasn't present. And my wife read a book recently called Present Over Perfect. Mm-hmm. And thinking through, there was a lot of conversations that, like, I never had with my dad, and I'm super grateful. I just got home from Alaska. I took my dad to Alaska fishing for 10 days. That's incredible.
It was, man. We rented an RV and drove around, and we stayed a couple of days at each campsite, and I went through this book with him, just about his life story, and it's like a journal that has all these question prompts, and we had the opportunity to really sit down and talk and
hear his story
and
for the first time.
Story.
Isn't that wild?
Super deep,
like, wow, the perspective. I never realized that. Yeah, there was some hurt that they never dealt with.
100%, right? So like he was telling me, he's like, yeah, Grandma and Grandpa, Grandma and Grandpa were super strong believers. Grandma read the Bible every day. They prayed all the time, but there was no church for them because they drank and smoked, and nobody would allow them to come to church. And I'm just like mind blown by these different stories, but it also gave me an opportunity to like hear his side. For me, I sat there and I was like, well, you were never here and you were always working and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, lists off all these different things. And I'm like, oh crap. Like, I am my father's son. Like,
Dude.
And so I'm like, okay, so how do I make sure, cause like, I didn't have conversations with my dad, deep philosophical conversations. Same. We didn't read the Bible together. We didn't, do any of that stuff. I knew that he was involved in Bible study fellowship, and I knew that on, Monday nights he went to Bible study, and don't interrupt him from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock because he's procrastinated and he's now finishing up his, his study, and he's reviewing it, right? Yeah. And there's like stuff like that where I knew that. I mean, we went to church every weekend. I knew that he was involved in it. And, but we also, like, he never took me out into the wilderness and sat me down and said, hey, son, like, this is what's going to happen when you turn 13 and become a man. And this is, here are some challenges you're going to have with women or, drugs or alcohol or, like he told me, he's like, your grandfather was like a weekend alcoholic. He drove truck during the week, so he never drank during the week. But on the weekends, he'd crack open that case of Budweiser, and he was drunk all weekend. And he's like, and both my grandparents smoked. And so my dad was like, I knew that was a problem, and so I never touched it. Well, I saw my dad, and I said, well, my dad never had a problem with it, neither will I. Except I never got that backstory that it ran in the family. Boom. And then here I am, drugs, alcohol,
figuring out on our own, doing what we want to do. Isn't that crazy, man?
So hearing that side of it, and like, and taking the time to go through Wild at Heart and exposing myself and like allowing myself to open up, and it's really given me the mindset of just how important it is to be intentional with our children. And man, with devices nowadays and like, we can be there physically, but are we present? Are we having those conversations? Are we, playing games with our kids that aren't digital, right? Are we going on family walks? Like, man, I tell you what, man, for me, COVID was like one of the most amazing things that ever happened. We kind of like shut the world out and did our own thing. And like, we went on family walks together routinely. We had more bonfires on the summer of 2020 than ever. Like I felt like we were super connected as a family unit, and we just kind of gotten away from it. But it's one little unintentional miss at a time, and the next thing you know, this whole thing is unraveled. There's this huge gap, and now you're like drowning in trying to figure out, how do I get back?
How did I get here? First of all, right?
And now how do I get back? And so like I said, like, I almost lost my marriage in 22 and 21, 22. I can't remember. It's irrelevant, other than I have put in a ton of time and energy over the last couple of years to really focus in and rebuild that. And now that that's more stabilized and like we know where we stand in each other's lives, now I'm taking the time and opportunity to really pour into my kids so that they know where they stand. And part of that is like making the separation between work and family. And I'm super grateful and blessed that my business allows me to do that, and
again, part of the stewardship is like recognizing that is a benefit, that not to squander that and use it for you, but to say, how I'm going to reinvest that time into things that matter, that are of the kingdom. And dude, I think we share a similar story around walking through seasons of life or sin or having to clean up oops and messes from our sin. And so I'm not too outside of the fact of sharing the infidelity that I had. And I've gotten to a point now with my 13-year-old and my 12-year-old that I've shared with them what I have done and what had happened and how I cheated on their mom. And the result of that, first of all, is like, it's like, what? It's like everyone puts their parent on a pedestal until you see a bad side of them. And then you have this like crazy, weird, opinion of them. But when your parent can own, like probably in the experience had with your dad just recently, unpacking the human side, but this is what happened and these are the consequences and this is why I didn't do that. I started doing that, and that's part of like what I believe this podcast can be, is just the place for the vulnerability to be a form of strength. Because when I did that with my own kids, often when they tell themselves they're inferior, it's of the enemy. They tell themselves they're not good enough. They tell themselves they can't do something. I start talking about how short I am. I'm 5'6". I talk about how bald I am. I talk about, the fact that I have hair that connects from my beard and it doesn't stop. And and then it runs out up here and all the things. I just roast myself, but I end up telling them that the reality is, if we don't have a way to keep ourselves on track, it takes, the saying goes, we deceive ourselves with the smallest of compromises, right? So in a plane flight, that 1 degree off, it's called the 1 in 60 rule, right? You can get off track just by 1 degree, and you're off by a lot when you see that flight play out. Right. And that's what it is. And talk about COVID. And we need resets like COVID. But at the same time, how blessed are we to take what we have now as time, but then we go, am I using the time in the way I'm supposed to be? And that goes back to that steward thing. So when it comes down to it, it's doing the right things with what we've been given. And I think when we get that order correctly, we're going to make mistakes. But when we can own our mistakes and then have a teachable moment out of that and bring in the humility of, hey, I get it. I struggled with this too. Like, I hid pornography magazines up in my drop tile ceiling. I used to get them from the recycling bins when I was going after Pepsi points to build my Pepsi point empire, and learn about things I should have never have learned about, and addicted to nicotine at the age of basically 13, 14, and not stopping until the age of 37, dude, like 39. So that's like a year and a half ago I stopped. All nicotine. And so I grew up in a Christian home. I knew who Jesus was. Was he Lord of my life? No, but and the tobacco and nicotine didn't keep me from him, but it had a grip on me, right?
100%.
And even alcohol is one of those things where if not put into a place of understanding where your vice gets tight and has a grip, some people, that's zero tolerance, right? And I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, we all fall short.